Hey fans, today I want to talk about Joe Morgan's letter to Hall of Fame voters. Joe Morgan wrote a letter that he released and sent by email where he basically condemned people, these players who use steroids and PEDs during their career and argued that they should not be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. He stated that the numbers were inflated and by comparison it made it look like the players who were clean, that their numbers were less significant because they were smaller and that therefore they did not deserve to be placed alongside players like, of course, Morgan and Schmidt and other players who were steroid-free in their career. It's no coincidence that this letter came out this year as opposed to previous years because the two biggest known steroid users, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, have been gaining traction. And last year they had more than 50% of the vote. If they received more than 75%, they could very well be, or they would be, inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I think this is very much a reaction against that, an attempt not just on Morgan, but also, since he represents the Hall of Fame, being the vice chairman, a attempt by the Hall to try to limit the damage that was done by the steroids era and trying to keep out those who were tainted by steroids. And certainly I would agree that when we're talking about Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, I think there the issue is pretty clear. Both of them knew what they were doing was wrong. In both instances with Bonds and Clemens, they knew it was against the rules, and they did it anyway. It bothers me immensely that Bonds holds two home run records, the record for the single-season home runs and also the record for career home runs, when we know that the majority of those home runs were hit when Bonds was on the steroids. And that really does bother, especially since Bonds knew what he was doing was against the rules. But I think we have a different question when we're looking at players like Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. Now let's go back and think about 1998, the summer of 1998, when they were chasing Roger Maris's record. The first thing about that is it was just a couple years removed from the strike season that took away the World Series. And baseball was on a decline. Fans were angry. Fans were annoyed that we had lost the World Series. And it looked like baseball was taking a huge hit and it needed a shot in the arm in order to regain its popularity. So when Bonds and when Bonds and Sosa were on the tear and were looking like they were on a pace to beat Roger Maris's record, that focused a lot of people's attention on the sport again. And because of that, a lot of things that we knew about them were forgiven. I mean, the story broke in the middle of the season about the use of Mark McGwire of a steroid precursor, something that he used that wasn't necessarily a steroid, but once it got into the body, turned into a steroid. It wasn't against the rules. And even back then, using steroids, it wasn't against the rules. And not only was it not against the rules, but there was pressure during that era to use the steroids. I remember an interview with Curt Schilling during the waning years of his career when he was in Boston, talking about how general managers and executives were placing pressure on their players. Well, why don't you use the steroids? And now, I don't know if it necessarily was something that happened to him, but nonetheless, he talked about how there was pressure within the baseball executive and the baseball organizations to start, to use the steroids to prolong a career, to have the players hit more and farther and harder home runs. And there was pressure from the fans because we loved watching the home runs. We loved the Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire competition. Right? So because it wasn't against the rules at the time, and because there was pressure on the players to do it, and because the fans were so accepting, I see Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire in a much different light than I see Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds. And I know McGwire has already been disqualified from receiving votes from the Baseball Writers Association. Sosa is still on the ballot. McGwire is not on this year's ballot for the Eras Committee, but one day he may be. Would I be upset if he were placed in the Hall? That's a tough question. It's a tougher question for me than Clemens and Barry Bonds. It's an interesting debate. If you have an opinion, I would love to hear your opinion. Please put it in the comments below. If you like this video, or if you want to hear some more about it, please give me a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more videos like this or see more videos like this in the future and join the conversation, by all means, please subscribe. Thank you so much for your time.